Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome to the second episode of this game series using Unity and Blender. Today we're going to learn how to make prefabs and materials in Unity, and we're going to start programming so that we can eventually add some functionality to our cannon. But before we get started, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to see more content like this in the future. Okay, let's get started. I want to bring your attention over to this little gizmo in the top right of your scene window. Here you can see all the three axes, the Y, X, and Z. And remember, in Unity the Y axis points up, not the Z. And we want to make sure that our game objects are facing the Z axis. So you might have to rotate your cannon so that the opening is facing the Z axis. And you can do all of this in the transform component under the inspector window at the top right of the screen. With that out of the way, we're going to head on over to our hierarchy window and right click and add a 3D object. The object that we're going to add is a sphere, and you can see that the sphere appears in our scene window, but it's a little out of place. We can reset its position by heading over to the transform component, click on the three dots and click on the reset option, and this will reset the transform of the sphere. So now it is at the origin of our entire world. Now let's reposition it a little bit, bring it up, and we want to position it right in front of the cannon. And so I'm going to reset the cannon so that it's center in the x-axis. Now we're going to position the cannon right in the opening there. Now I'm going to rescale the cannon to make it a little bit bigger. We can play around with some values here, but the end values I will set to be 1.5 on all of the axes. And there is our cannonball. So let's head over to add component. And we're going to add what's known as a rigid body. And the rigid body allows our object to use physics. And we can see this by clicking on the play button. And you can see how our object falls and hits the ground. See that our camera was a little off center, so I'm just going to reposition it here using the gizmos and changing the position and rotation in the transform component. And you can see when you click on the camera object at the bottom right of your scene window, you will see what the camera is seeing. So now you can play around with all these values until you get something that you want. Now I'm just going to change this Y rotation to be 180 degrees and then reposition the camera again. And when I hit the play button, we have everything in the center. Now let's go ahead and add a material to our cannonball. I'm going to right click in the project window at the bottom of the screen and highlight over create, and what we want to create is a material. So click on the material option and you can name this material whatever you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and name it cannonball material. Once you're done, hit enter. And now over here under the surface inputs, we can select our color. So you can make it any color that you want. I'm going to go ahead and make mine this black color. And then I'm going to drag the material and place it onto our cannonball. Last things that I'm going to do is rename it. There are a few different ways that you can rename an object. I'm going to head over to the inspector window, and at the top there I can change the name. I'm going to change it to Cannonball. With all of that out of the way, there's one last thing that we have to do. We have to turn our game object here, our Cannonball game object, into a prefab. And a prefab is going to allow us to do a few different neat things. And one of those things is that we can add many cannonballs with the original configuration that we just made. So that way, if we decide to have 50 different cannonballs, we don't have to go and add a rigid body to all of them, a material, and so on. And if we want to add some programming, some different behaviors, we don't have to do that for each and every one of them. We can just create one cannonball, make it into a prefab, and that will take care of all the configuration for us. And we can create a prefab by clicking on the cannonball object in the hierarchy and dragging it into the project window. And there is our cannonball prefab. So now we can click on the cannonball object in the hierarchy and delete it by right clicking and selecting the delete option. And now if we drag a cannonball on there, you can see that you have the rigid body already attached and the material with the correct scales and rotation. And you can add more than one, like I said before. And these will all have the same configuration. I'm going to undo that with Command Z or Control Z, depending on if you're on Mac or Windows. And now let's go ahead and add some behavior to our cannon. We're going to head over to the project window, right click, create, and we're going to want to create a C# script. And you can name the script whatever you'd like. I'm going to name it Cannon since it will handle all of our cannon behavior. And hit enter. And then double click the script to open it in Visual Studio. With your Cannon script open in Visual Studio, you will see a whole bunch of C# code. And now is a good time to do a little bit of introduction to programming. Today we're going to cover classes, functions, variables, and condition statements. Starting off with classes. Classes can be defined as a blueprint for an object which defines its behavior. In Visual Studio, we can see that a class has already been made for us, and it has the exact same name that we entered for the script, a Cannon class. Then we have functions. Functions are a set of instructions which only runs when it is called. An example of this is if we had a function called move, and we can define inside of this function that the object needs to rotate to the left first and then move forward. In Visual Studio, we have two functions that have already been made for us. There is the start function and the update function, which we will be looking at in further depth later on. Then we have variables. Variables are a memory location that stores some data. And this data can be changed when the program is running. Variables can be either public or private. A public variable is available to all objects in the program. A private variable is only available to the functions in the class. And there are different types that are allowed in C# for our variables. We can have integers, floats, boolean strings, and a few more. And we will learn more about all of these throughout this series. And lastly, we're going to study conditional statements. Conditional statements check if a condition is true or false. And here we can see the basic setup for a conditional statement. We have the keyword if, followed by an open parentheses, and then inside we have our condition. We close the parentheses, and then underneath that we have two curly braces, and inside of these curly braces we're going to define a set of instructions that will happen when this condition is true. With conditional statements, we can check if two conditions are equal to each other. Like before, we have the if keyword. In programming, we usually use two equal signs to check for equality. We're checking if condition 1 is equal to condition 2. and then same structure as before, we have the two curly braces, and if those two conditions are equal, then the set of instructions will run. And lastly, we can check if two conditions are not equal to each other as well. And it's the same structure as before, except to check if two things are not equal to each other, we use the exclamation point and the equals sign. And this is read if condition 1 is not equal to condition 2, then the set of instructions inside of the curly braces will happen. And that's all we need to know for now. So now let's do a little bit of practice with some of these conditional statements. I will have a link in the description to this Replit page where you can practice some of these conditional statements on your own. To start off, let's check if two integers are equal to each other. So we write the keyword if, open parentheses, and let's say 5 equals 5. We obviously know that this is true. But let's print it out to the console. We're going to write console and then press on the period key, and this is known as dot notation, which will allow us to access properties of this console class. So again, we're going to write console dot and the function writeLine. Type true inside of two curly braces, and at the end of every statement we have to insert a semicolon to let the software know that we are done with this statement. Now if we click on run, here we can see that the console printed out true because 5 is equal to 5. And now, let's say if 5 wasn't equal to 5, then we should do some other behavior. Then we use this other keyword, else, without any parentheses, to run the set of instructions when 5 is not equal to this other number. And for now, I'm just going to write false to the console. So let's pick a different number. Let's say it's equal to 8. Let's check if 5 is equal to 8. And here I forgot to add the semicolon at the end of my statement, and as you saw, the program crashed. So now I'll insert that semicolon and then click on run. And obviously we know that 5 is not equal to 8, and so the console prints out false. So now let's practice how to write more of these conditions that would go inside of the parentheses of the if statement. Let's delete all of this and write out console dot writeLine. Let's pick some different numbers. 4 equals 4. We want to check if 4 is equal to 4. And if we run this, we know that that is true. Now if we change it to, let's say, 4 equals 2 times 2, the console prints out true because it calculates 2 times 2 first, and then it checks if 4 is equal to 2 times 2. And obviously 2 times 2 is equal to 4, so this statement is still true. We can test if other things are equal to each other as well, aside from integers. Let's say we wanted to see if two pieces of text were equal to each other. Here we have the text AB, and I'm going to put that in quotations. And this is known as a string in programming, when something is inside of the quotations. We want to check that the string AB is equal to the string AB, and that prints out true, because they're both equal to each other. But if I change this first string to be AC, then we know that these two things aren't equal to each other, and we print out false. So go ahead and practice using some of these conditional statements, writing conditions yourself, see what you can make equal to each other and what you can't. And please, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. Alright everyone, that was it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this mini intro to programming. In the next video, we're going to get started on adding some behavior to our cannon. We're going to apply all of the concepts that we just learned into our game and see if we can make our cannon rotate and move. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to like and subscribe by hitting that button right there. Take care everyone.